p.m. So I will call the Anacortes City Council meeting of July 13th, 2020 to order. Welcome, Ms. Moulton. Ms. Hunt, would you take the roll, please?
Mr. Carter?
Here.
Mr. Young?
Here.
Mr. Walters?
Here.
Ms. Cleland McGrath? Ms. Moulton?
We're here, sorry.
Thank you.
Here.
Mr. McDougall?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to item 2, announcements and committee reports. The first item is a COVID-19 update. And the latest information I received from Skagit County today is since Saturday, we've had 46 new cases. We had 29 on Saturday, 11 on Sunday, and 6 today. That brings us up to 619 cases in the county. 471 people have recovered. 61 people have been hospitalized, and 16 deaths. They're highly recommending at the county that as long as we're in phase 2, we do as much of our traveling in our county and we don't travel outside of our county. They've had several cases over the last few weeks of people related traveling out of our county now to the state. Just to remind everyone, we're still in a pandemic and staying close to home this summer is the wisest thing for your health. They also, at the county health department, they are advising that we continue to wear a mask whenever you're with people outside your immediate household. Meaning, if you go sit with grandma in the backyard, put on your mask. If you go get groceries and take them to your neighbor, put on your mask. If you're babysitting for your sister, put on your mask. On and on and on. Just put on your mask, and we'll get through this. Another bit of good news: Skagit County has received $1 million for grants for small businesses, and they will give grants out for up to $25,000. And these will be through EDAS. Will manage this for them, and these grants are being accepted starting today through July 26th. So if you know of a business that is still in need of funding, is struggling, there's another opportunity to get assistance. And that can be found on EDAS or the county's website. Here locally at Island Hospital, we are at, to date, we've done 2,422 tests in Anacortes. We've had 40 positive cases. We've had 40 positive hospitalized cases, and we've had no deaths in Anacortes from COVID-19. In the United States, we've had over 3,300,000 cases, and 60,000 of those are new cases in the last week or so. And we've had 134,000 deaths in the United States. Globally, we've had 12.8 million cases and 567,000 deaths. Today, to close up my report, I sat in with a Zoom call through the chamber with the hospitality industry and the Department of Labor. And the statistics that I found interesting to share with you tonight were that the hospitality industry, which is heavily restaurants, is 40%, it's down 43%. There's still a loss of 152,000 jobs in the state of Washington in the hospitality industry. Other retail sectors are down 23% with 30,000 lost jobs. So they said, like in the Depression in 2008, numbers were in the ranges of 30 to 50%. Anyway, my point being, they were much these numbers are much greater than what happened during our recession. And so we're hoping it's short term, but I was particularly interested since we're so restaurant heavy here in Anacortes that we need to do whatever we can to keep our restaurants going. The restaurant industry, the hospitality industry says wear a mask. Masks save jobs. Masks will save your business. I think the chamber said, cover your face and save your favorite place. So I will close with that. So COVID's alive and well, and we need to continue to practice safety, and we'll navigate through this. All right, so that's my report for tonight. Any questions? All right, we'll move on to item 2B, which is our Port City Liaison Committee report.
Mayor Gear.
Ms. Cleland?
Hey. So Mr. Carter and Mr. Young attended, and you and Mayor Gear, we all attended the Port City Liaison meeting on July 7th. So I will go through my notes because it was a while ago. So we talked about COVID-19 and how it's kind of impacting both the municipality and the port. And then we jumped around and discussed the Northwest Basin redevelopment status and subcommittee agenda. So tentatively July 30th, the port and then the planning committee are going to do a walkthrough and look at kind of a master plan of 9th Street and Market Street and how we can all work together. We want to make sure things continue to move forward. But just so we have got our eyes together on the ground and all on the same page. So we're looking forward to that, as is the port. And so we'll have a good agenda planned so that we have a discussion. The next thing we discussed was kind of what we're, the shoreline master plan and where we're at, and also the critical areas study, just to make sure that both the port can get their comments in, because some of the above water aquaculture that occurs at the end of commercial, some of those things need some clarifications from ecology, and so we want to make sure that the port and some of our businesses can get their comments in and understand what's going on. So we're hoping to have the shoreline master plan come before Planning Commission July 22nd, and then possibly we'll see public hearing in August. There's a lot of clarifying the language that needs to be discussed, a few new guidelines, and then the critical area, again, we're hoping to have move forward to the City Council in August, but you know, it's all tentative at this point. The next thing we discussed was the Maritime Strategic Plan and kind of update the Anacortes Boat and Yacht Show that occurred via Zoom meetings was, I think, successful is what the port said. You know, it was a little different to kind of call in, but they were happy that it occurred, and the stakeholders that put it on were pleased with the event. And, you know, could use some tweaks, but it's the first of its kind, and we're glad it happened in Anacortes. Then we also talked about Port and EDASC, and the city is working on a fast foil blue marine initiative. And that is trying to get funding to do some kind of a prototype. Now, this fast ferry may or may not happen in our local Anacortes waters, but probably on a busier run somewhere else. But the importance is that the port of Anacortes is involved, and our port of Skagit is involved in EDASC, and that we've got a lot of businesses who can design and build in our valley, and we want to be part of that conversation and hopefully move forward with that. EDASC is coordinating grants, which I think we'll probably hear about, and doing a business impact survey. They actually awarded Anacortes businesses 15 different businesses grants, and 5 of them were in the maritime industry. So that's really exciting out of our out of the EDASC funding. There were about 30 awarded. And then also the EDASC is facilitating a weekly meeting with ports and business. And Representative Rick Larson is on a lot of those meetings. So that's really a cool thing that's continuing to happen as we're all working remotely. There was a little discussion about a study that's occurring about privatizing the ferry run between Sydney and Anacortes, but that's really in tentative discussion, so nothing to report back there. The port is pleased because they're continuing to work on their big four projects, which is clean up at Quiet Cove, and that has been bid and approved, should be occurring between early August and mid-September. The transit shed piling improvement project is moving forward. The A-dock is rebuild is out for bid, and they're pleased with kind of what they're receiving. And then Curtis Wharf is continuing with their repairs. The last thing we discussed was the Depot Plaza restroom, which is kind of on the city's end for development or for construction, but is next to port property. So we have some lay down work that's going to happen there, but it's moving along slowly but surely. So that was my long-winded discussion of our committee meeting. So if anyone has anything to add.
Good recap. Any additions, discussion? Wonderful. Okay, we'll move on to the Finance Committee.
Mayor Gear.
Yes, Mr. McDougall.
Jeremy, did you want to go?
No, it doesn't matter to me.
Mr. Carter.
Sure.
You're on, Carter.
Perfect. The few things that, one thing we talked about was possibly going back to the annual budget instead of the biannual budget, especially with everything going on right now. Be easier to kind of go 1 year out. And we had also talked about the proclamation put out by the governor, 20-23.4. There's no late fees or disconnects of the city utilities. So we have about 100 to 150 people on the disconnected list. And we talked about possibly using the COVID relief funding to help out with those people on the disconnect list. And then also the update of our sales tax, that we are not as far off as we had budgeted. We're about 7% off from our budget on sales tax. So we are doing a little bit better than we originally had planned for.
Yep. Anything else for finance? Okay. The Housing, Affordability, and Community Services Committee, or better known as HACS.
Mayor Gear?
Yes.
Thank you. The HACS committee met this afternoon. Ms. Cleland McGrath and Ms. Stewart and Mr. Miesemer and I were there, and we had a very good presentation from John Doyle of Habitat for Humanity, and he has been working with planning department staff about the possibility of building affordable housing units on city-owned property. So that is an ongoing discussion. We are able to possibly lease public property for affordable housing under RCW 39.33.015. So that's being explored. There are several city properties that might work for these developments. There's one on West 6th, there's one on West 5th, and then there's some acreage on 17th, sort of in the west part of town, where we talked about the potential of maybe doing some cottage development. But this is all very early stages. But the conversation is being had that the housing itself would be financed by Habitat for Humanity, and the city would potentially lease the land to the homeowner to keep the cost low, to keep it affordable in perpetuity, hopefully. So when it would be sold, it would be affordable to the next household. So it would be a way to create some affordable housing, home ownership opportunities in Anacortes. And with leasehold fees, possibly have a fund that could then in turn contribute toward more affordable housing. So again, this is very early stages, but potentially some pretty exciting opportunities coming up ahead, because they'll get funding for the housing, and then we would be the leaseholder on the property. So we also talked with Mr. Hoagland about our affordable housing sales tax, and he spoke with Dustin and Brian, Dustin from the Family Center and Brian from the Housing Authority, about the timeline for their projects, both the Olson building, which will happen a little bit later on, and the townhomes which I think will be on 18th Street or 19th. They're a little further along in their planning. So that would be coming up first. And the Family Center, their new development that will happen on 26th Street, it will be coming along next. So they apparently have financing to move forward, and our affordable housing tax money that Anacortes will get back from the state and will contribute to the Housing Authority and the Family Center. They are going to be able to be flexible on who needs it when, and be able to make sure that they're equal in what they get, but they'll each get it when they need it most. So it's great to have the flexibility with these two organizations, and being so good to work together and with us also. We talked about grants that the Department of Commerce is giving and the possibility of the school district getting some of that money. And if we could help with grants toward early learning, which has been put some parents in tough situations because they're paying for preschool when their kids aren't going to preschool. So it's been a big financial burden, but they're needing to hold their spots. So figuring out how we can help in those areas. And we talked about CARES Act funding. Was that in HACS or was that in Planning Committee meeting? Christine, help me out.
It kind of blended together. But it was, we discussed kind of how we can make sure we use all of the CARES Act funding, and to have some different ideas in place if our projects that are already in place or the costs of doing business with COVID times doesn't quite get up to the amount we've been approved for. So maybe, looking at if the Senior Activity Center, as we move into the winter months, needs some additional funding because people won't be able to get outside and drive as easily. If it means doing some kind of a tenting on some of these parklets so we can extend the season. But we just kind of wanted to get some ideas, so we've got some things in place. If we get closer to October and we haven't spent all the money, we want to take advantage of everything that's available.
Thank you. As of last week, we had spent about $240,000 of it. So all staff time related to COVID is being kept track of, all equipment, all supplies. So staff is keeping a very careful eye on that and how we're using it. And I think, in October we will was when we first can apply for a drawdown of that money, when we'll actually get that funding. That's in October. And we also heard that the legislature may loosen some of the restrictions on lodging tax money and REIT funding in order to use some of that toward COVID relief and recovery as well. So we will learn more about that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our final report is the Planning Committee. Ms. Cleland.
Yeah, so Carolyn and Ms. Moulton and I also attended the Planning Committee meeting, which blended right in. The main discussion we had was about this next weekend and our attempt at a closed street and allowing businesses to move into the main street. And, we've got, they finally came in. We've got stickers for sidewalks to encourage 6 foot social distancing, and then also remind people to wear masks. So when they enter stores, those are a friendly little reminder on the ground. They've also got signage for the streets when we do these closed streets for parking. After discussion with a lot of our retailers and our businesses in the downtown core, it's been determined that this first trial run, we're going to keep 4th, 6th, and 8th streets open to cross traffic, so at least people can get across commercial and get some parking in place. It just seemed like a concern of a lot of our business owners that we allow people in cars to kind of get as close as possible. So we will still have the signage up with quick drop-off pickup locations along all of those closed streets, cross streets, but It just makes it a little bit more for ease of use. And just as a note, if you are coming down to this event, that the public restrooms, both at the chamber and our public restrooms at 5th and O, will be open and available for you all to use. So hopefully you come on down. Ms. Moulton, do you have stuff to add?
I sure do. Thank you. We talked about, one of my concerns is that in downtown revitalization, we're emphasizing that we want our local people to come down and support our local businesses and spend their money there. My initial concern has been that I felt that it was exclusive to people who had the money to spend, that we're keeping out people who might not be able to afford to go out to dinner or to purchase things at our local shops. So I was really struggling with that. But due to the governor's proclamation, we are not allowed to have events per se.
Right.
So my feeling was, we want to have live music, we want to have silent movies and social distance so anyone who comes down can feel welcome and have something to do. Because when we have open streets events, people want things to do. They want entertainment. They want a reason to stay. But we're not actually really allowed to do that right now. So we're in a really tricky position of balancing this economic recovery with also our social recovery. And so instead of having a bunch of tables and chairs downtown where anyone can sit, only the restaurants will have them right now because they'll be sanitized all the time and they'll be monitored to make sure that the people that are sitting there together are just 5. So it's a very tricky balance, and I'm still struggling with it, but it appears that this right now, for this first one, we have to do it this way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the way that it is right now. It's a soft opening, and it's more of like a pocket idea rather than closing the whole street and having everyone come down and enjoy it. So we're trying to walk that line, and with the hopes that very soon we will be able to do more and have it more of a downtown revitalization, not just in the financial sense. It will be social, but for it to be more of the kind of event that we've all become accustomed to and love so much. But I still think it's going to be great, and I encourage everyone local. The other thing that we were worried about, which I hadn't thought of initially, is that if we have this event that no one else is having, we really don't want to draw people from out of town here. This is for our citizens, so we also have to be really careful about not doing something that's bringing people from elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. So, and Carolyn, I'm going to step in right now. Thank you for that. I think what's so important for us to remember right now, we're in phase 2 of COVID. We're not even supposed to leave home without a mask. So we are on this really tricky tightrope of trying to help our businesses and keeping our community safe. And if we do anything that jeopardizes that, we're just going to be going backwards. And I don't want to be known as the town that caused the spike. I don't want to be that place. And because then the health department will be living here and we won't be doing anything. We won't be on restriction until we're really old. So the other thing the restaurant station said today is not to look for phase 4 to well into 2021. So when and if we get to phase 3, where we can have groups of maybe 10, we're going to be lucky to get that done this summer if we all can follow the rules. So after today's report from the Restaurant Association, it just drove home to me how important it is to really have something that supports our local businesses. It's not a festival. It's a way to let our citizens shop and eat out safely. And that's the difference, Carolyn. I know what you want, and that'll come, but it'll be in a phase or 2.
Right.
Mayor Gier?
Mr.
We had a
Miller.
great conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Miller.
Yeah, and I appreciate Ms. Moulton's struggling with that dilemma of a festival. I never viewed, from my perspective, I never viewed this as a festival. It was an opportunity for us as a city to provide more space to retailers, both restaurants and retailers, that have a mandate on them of a 50% reduction. So it's really just about creating additional space for them to be able to operate without going out of to limp them along without going out of business while we're in phase 2. So I'm glad to hear the report from the committee that we're going to keep 4th, 6th, and 8th streets open, because people actually are still driving their cars, and a lot of the dry good retailers depend on that car traffic, especially on Saturdays. It wasn't so long ago that I did own an independent retail business, and Saturday was our biggest day. And again, that was my reluctance last week of having the closure from 5 p.m. Friday all the way till 10 p.m. Saturday. I think the 4th, 6th, and 8th streets is a good compromise, but we should also be again ready for additional feedback from retailers that we can help. Again, we're trying to help limp them along through this COVID restriction, not necessarily create a big street festival.
Thank you.
Mr. Young.
Well, I agree with Mr. Miller and wholeheartedly appreciate the thought that's been going into how we can help our retail businesses not only survive, but those people in our city who are so ready for at least a little bit of what I'm calling safe social, SS. And, and it's hard and it's difficult. So I really appreciate the ideas that the planning committee and Ms. Moulton has put forward. I think that as soon as we can, when it's reasonably safe, I'd like for us to consider looking at it again deeply and see if it can work for us. But I do appreciate that, and it just shows how well-rounded the thinking is going into that as committees and as the city, we're doing to ensure that we not only meet the safety requirements, but also that we help our businesses that need us so badly right about now. So,
Thank you.
if I could switch, go right ahead. I apologize.
Mr. McDougall?
Mr. Young, did you have one last thought, or?
Well, I did, but it was on another subject. So if you're speaking on that, I will bring it up right after you. Thank you, Mr. McDougall.
I'm on this subject, yeah. Actually, Mayor Gear, could we have yourself or planning committee kind of articulate what the mask expectations are for Friday night and Saturday?
The mask, as in wearing them, or in
Exactly. Like, what are we expecting? Are we expecting people to be wearing a mask at all times when they're in the open streets area, except when they're sitting down and eating? Or are we?
It's recommended if you're within, yes, we're going to follow the governor's mandate, and if you're within less than 6 feet of someone, you need to mask up. And then if you're seated at a table eating and drinking with 5 or less people, you can take your mask off. But I think we really need to, if 10 people come downtown, they can safely go without masks in the street. But if 500 people come down, we need to make sure. So, yes, I assume we're going to follow the same protocol that we do every day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely want to make sure.
Like I said, in county, there were 29 new cases, 41 over the weekend. It's ridiculous. So,
yeah.
And so far, we have been so lucky in Anacortes. I don't want that to happen here. So,
yeah, and I think we'd like to be able to repeat this event as well, not have it be a one-time thing. So we want to definitely be safe.
So Mr. Meismer and I, Friday, we visited around 50 businesses. We handed out the flyer on the event. Most were very excited. They're ready to have customers, have more space to have customers. 5 were very concerned. That's where the cross streets really went a long ways. And a couple were very concerned that we were doing this in phase 2, feeling like it wasn't, we weren't ready for it. So that's why we especially have to follow the county's guidelines. So thank you. Anything else on this topic? Okay, Mr. Walters.
I just want to reiterate that while the event is great, what we need to do is create more space all the time. That's how we originally started with this effort with the parklets. I think the parklets continue to be a good idea, but will not be sufficient by themselves. We need to go beyond that. Looking at half street closures or something else. We need to create more space, not create festivals, as you point out, but create the opportunity for more occupancy of a restaurant with more social distancing at the same time. And not limit it just to restaurants, but also include shops. We've got to figure that out. So once we're past this event, I think we should resume our laser focus on that slightly different goal.
Okay. Thank you for that. Okay, anything else? All right, Mr. Young, you had something else for the group?
Absolutely. I really wanted to not only let my fellow council members know, as well as the public, given all of the protests and conversations we're having around the country, the police chief, Chief Smalls, and myself had a great conversation. I met with the entire team, and we had what I call a talk and chat, and it was absolutely authentically honest with their thoughts and my thoughts. How do we bridge this together? What I thought was important that I wanted to share is that we truly do have a superb police force here in the town. There are award-winning, and given the angst that's happening between communities and the discussion about police in other parts of the country, they just felt that the angst associated with them wasn't them, and therefore not true about who they are. I hear you, and as I said to them, I understand, and I wanted to just convey my thanks for just that open discussion, because we really did have deep conversations about what was expected, how do we get to where we need to be, how do we tell the story about who we are as a police force within the city. But I really wanted to thank them for that. Part of the challenge that we had, and as I expressed to them, I look forward to continuing our discussion, to continuing learning and meeting with them, and to also they recognize that there are police in other parts of the country that need work and need help. And the challenge that they face is in their code of silence, not supporting those police officers that may not be doing things appropriately. They understand that. And so the beauty of that conversation that we have greater dialogue. We're communicating one with another at a big level. And I believe some of the angst of the movement is really lessened, but more understood. So I wanted to thank the chief. I wanted to thank our officers. It was absolutely thrilling in the sense of an education, but I'm thankful that I live in Anacortes and we have the police force we do.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
One last thing. We did agree that it doesn't mean that there's not work we have to do, so I don't want anyone to misinterpret that. What it's saying is that we can communicate and look at one another and figure out how do we begin to address those systematic issues that are in play, and how can we help our current police force be even better? Because there's always room for improvement. So, again, thank you for allowing me that.
All right, thank you. Okay, anything else before we move on? Okay, we're going to go to item 3, our consent agenda. These are all action items. We have the minutes for July 6th, approval of claims, and a contract modification from Municipal Broadband Network Library to the MST aerial areas. Mr. Miller.
Mayor Gear, I move we approve items A through C in the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Miller, a second by Mr. Carter. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Is there anything else for the good of the order? All right, if not, I will adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you all for your service. See you later.